Hi, I'm Dave Wurzel, and you're watching Spotlight. Today's Spotlight is going to be on avian flu. Not necessarily a fun topic, but it's been in the news quite a bit. And a few months ago, we received the warning, the alerts. If you're birders about not putting out the bird feed and things like that. The concern about bird migration moving through the area, and now we're in the midsummer. Okay, and I just saw an article in the Tribune the other day that said, is the outbreak ending? Is it coming to an end? And so what we want to do is we're going to take a look a little bit at what is avian flu and what is the impact of it. And to kind of help us take a look at that issue is Mel Tracy, who's the owner of Wild Birds Unlimited in Palos Park. Mel, thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And I know you've read quite a bit on the different CDC websites, this state website, you visited that, and I know that it's obviously a topic you research, can impact your business. And I've read some of those websites and articles too. And so maybe we can kind of, clarify some of the issues related to this topic, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to hit you with the first one. First of all, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Avian flu, this one is H5N1. And and I know I've heard those letters and numbers before. Right. Is it gone? How do you like that question?
Well, that's a good question. And first of all, avian flu is never gone because it's in the ducks every year, so it's not going to go away. This is just some years are a lot more impactful than others, right. But it's always with us. So it's not gone away. And this particular strand, though, I think we're going to see it again in the fall. As the ducks are up north, they're going to start moving back, migrating through,
right.
And you'll see some more impacts probably. But again, it's mostly just the chickens. That's the primary.
And we'll get to that. Matter of fact, that's my next question. Thank you. Here, good dovetail. But so there's always an avian flu out there then? Is that correct? And just some years it's worse than others.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like we had a bad one in 2015, I think it was. 50 million birds were killed.
You did your research.
And so in perspective, this year is maybe going to be like that year in terms of how bad it is?
Right? Yeah, I think it's going to be equivalent. And probably in 6 or 7 years we'll have the same thing.
We'll go through it again.
Yeah. I would like to say just one thing,
Sure.
Just so, because if I was watching this interview, I'd be like, oh, so they got the bird feed guy to talk about about bird feeding and and the ban and all that. Yeah. So I just want to say, I understand that, and the other thing is well, maybe he's there because he's upset about his business or something. But actually, our business actually increased. Initially we had a downturn, but then it picked up. So I'm not here because I'm angry or anything. I just want to kind of clear the air, make sure everybody has the facts about what's going on with the birds.
Well, I think, and I hope that's what we can accomplish here, because I know when I saw the alert, from the state, don't put out your bird feed until May 31st. I'm like, oh my gosh. What kind of threat is this? I know they put out, the CDC has guidelines for human beings, if you find a dead bird in your yard, or if you handle your bird feeder.
Right.
I just cleaned mine, yesterday, or 2 days ago, as a matter of fact, about washing your hands and, things like that, not handling a dead bird if you find it. So it is obviously serious. And that kind of leads into the next question that you took me to is, specifically, which birds are at risk first? Let's talk about the birds at risk, and then maybe the other impacts of that, and then why those birds specifically. Okay.
So basically, no songbirds are affected by this, so you don't really have to worry about your bird feeders.
Can they carry the avian flu?
No.
Okay.
They don't carry it. They don't get it. And you and I, maybe this is one of the first times we're hearing about avian flu because it is in the news a lot because, we're all sensitive to disease and all that.
Right.
But this is very, very well researched. They've done tons of science on this. And they've looked at it because it does have such a big impact. It can have such an impact on agriculture and big impacts on farmers who are raising chickens. And it can have a significant impact.
Right.
So the CDC and all these different websites that you were talking about, or organizations that you were talking about before, they do and have done tons of research on this. And as we said, avian flu's been out there for a millennium, and it's never gotten into songbirds. You know.
So, and you kind of take, so which are the birds that are affected? You talk about the ag industry, and there was just an article. I went to the CDC website in mid-June. This is as of June 14th.
Yeah.
They said that 40 million plus, 40,088,000 and plus poultry birds were killed because, or they either had to kill or died because of avian flu.
Right.
It's a huge number. It's kind of alarming.
It is a big number.
When you look at the overall industry itself, it's actually a small percentage, but it still is a huge number.
It's a huge number.
As of mid-June, that 40 million represents 6% of chickens raised to produce eggs, 2.5% of turkey, and 1% of chickens raised for meat. So the percentages are not large. The numbers are huge, right?
Right.
Wild birds.
We like our chicken, apparently.
yeah, we do. But wild birds detected with avian flu, according to the CDC website, mid-June was 1,558 birds. Again, that's a large number, but when you think about the millions and millions of birds across the country, it's tiny.
Yeah, literally billions.
Yeah.
And it's not that there's 1,500 random birds. You know what I mean? If it was just kind of randomly, we could all be like, okay, we have to worry about, you know. But it's not random. It's just pretty much strictly restricted to waterfowl, kind of short waterfowl. What does that mean? Ducks and geese, those types of birds. Shorebirds can get it sometimes. It's primarily passed through the water.
Right.
Yeah, and so the other birds that are impacted, and this is kind of, I think, part of the reason why the organizations feel like an obligation is because like high-profile birds like eagles. I think there were like maybe 13 or 15 eagles that died from the bird flu, and they get it because they feed primarily on fish and duck. And so when a duck gets sick with this, they're going to pick that guy off because they're going to be weak. They eat it and they die. Some of the birds you see flying around here, like people call them the buzzards, the turkey vultures, they feed on dead birds. And so, they've got it. And, smaller numbers, but, but like I said, a lot of times I think people see like, oh, now the eagles are dying. We really have to do something.
Yeah. It sounds like it's unavoidable.
It is.
No matter what's happening, that's part of the cycle.
It is part of the cycle. Disease is just it's just part of the natural cycle, and it's unfortunate, but it does happen.
Yeah. So let's go. We were talking about birds at risk, and we talked about the ag industry, chickens and turkeys and those birds, and obviously other birds. What about so not the songbirds? What about the other birds that cruise through our backyard? Whether they're the grackles or mourning doves or blue jays, cardinals, robins, the rest of them.
I suppose basically the answer is none of those birds are going to get it. In theory, I suppose a blue jay could, because sometimes they eat dead things. But the thing you have to understand is just about a duck is a big animal. Can live 20 years or more, right? So over time they build up their immune system, and so they're really healthy and strong, and they carry this with them all the time. That's not true for like a blue jay. Blue jay's this little guy. He doesn't weigh very much. If he gets it, he's gonna die. He's gonna die pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so a duck can carry this as it's migrating from like down in Alabama or something, or Mississippi, and it can carry it. It can get sick. It can keep going and spread it. A backyard bird, that's kind of, especially in the April timeframe, the margins are tight. There's not a lot of food, natural foods around, and if that guy gets sick, he's not going to make it very long. But even with all the research, I don't think there was any blue jay that got affected by it.
How about, then we talked a little bit, so, the risk to humans now, and they say, well, what if you come into contact with an infected or a sick bird? And they talk about, watching for, if you get symptoms like fevers, and any of these sound like a regular flu or cold, chills, cough, sore throat, shortness of breath, headaches.
Well, before we get too much down this road, there's like virtually no chance of you getting it. The only cases that I know of, there's only a handful, and those were people who were not wearing their ventilators while they were inside of chicken farms, you know, chicken buildings where the
high
infection,
risk probably.
high risk. I mean, you can imagine there's quite a bit of feces and stuff around, and it gets airborne because there's just so much, you know. So that's the only cases I know of, is that just a person working inside of a chicken.
Right, you're in a high-risk situation. Now, I mean, I guess according to the CDC, they would say, well, in your own backyard, we'll go back to if you find a dead bird, don't handle it.
Don't handle it. Yeah.
As an extra precaution, when you're handling a bird feeder, you should be okay, but wash your hands anyway.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just common sense stuff.
Right.
Because even though like maybe avian flu isn't something we're going to catch, there's other things you could potentially get, and so you want to always be safe. You want to number one, whether it's a bird or a raccoon or a squirrel, you don't want to be handling dead anything.
Right. And so then how about the spread of it a little bit? So the spread that went through is really, it sounds like what you're saying was caused by waterfowl migrating through.
Right.
Wild birds can cause the spread of it too, or is it going to be spread by the waterfowl?
It's just waterfowl.
Just waterfowl.
Just waterfowl. All the other little birds we have migrating through, the warblers and the vireos and stuff. They don't. You have to see some kind of interaction. Like, how could they possibly interact with the duck feces and then still be able,
Right.
It's just not. It's never happened. I guess in theory,
it could.
It possibly could, but again, the avian flu isn't new. It's been around from before humans were here.
Right.
And so it's been around for forever, and it's never interacted with the other birds. So
it's like, it sounds like in that analogy or that line of thought, it's like any disease in that, or flus, in that some years it's more virulent than other years.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And because it resides in these ducks, it can kind of change over time, but.
So then, getting a couple of last questions here. One is, so part of the reason avian flu doesn't actually die off, it slows down typically either because of where we're at in the migration season or how severe or the variant of the flu.
Right.
Okay.
And so, I mean, it's constantly residing in the ducks, but they're just immune to it. You know, they built up a healthy immune system, and so it can kind of live in them, and it doesn't affect them. Yeah.
And probably in the ag, and now I'm guessing, and I don't have the research on this, but in the ag industry, because those birds are farm birds, they don't have long lifespans.
No.
And they're not developing immune systems.
They don't.
So they can't.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not breeding birds, to have healthy immune systems. We're breeding them to grow fast and
for a food source.
Be a food source, right? So they basically don't have it. And so when you read about all the were you going to say?
No,
that?
Go ahead.
Just when you read these numbers of 40 million killed, a lot of those were killed by the farmers. They weren't. They were
trying
sickened.
They're trying to control the spread of the disease.
So if they get two birds in a house that holds 100,000, they're going to kill all of the 100,000.
Yeah, hoping to save. To save their
so it doesn't get to the next
batch.
house.
Yeah.
Yes, because they're turning these things over.
Right.
If these chickens go from kind of, egg to completely ready for sale in 8 or 10 weeks, they're going to turn that over 5 times. They don't want the next batch to get it either.
Yeah. And then, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit. This is, again, from that article in the Tribune, the University of Georgia researcher who said, David Stalkneck said, we may have an even bigger peak this year in the fall. Who knows? And I like his words to who knows, but I think he's probably alluding to there's going to be another migration through the other direction.
Right.
It'll show up again. Numbers may go up again.
Yeah.
But we really don't know for sure.
We don't know for sure, but I mean,
it seems likely.
It seems likely for sure. Yeah. So these guys, they're all kind of migrating together. They're using the same kind of winds, and they're hitting the same spots. They learn year over year, like, hey, this lake is in a preserve and it's safe.
Right.
Don't go to this one,
Right.
So they use these same kind of migration ways. So all those birds are kind of congregating. Right. When they get to Minnesota or Canada where they're breeding, they're all going to like their own lakes. So they're kind of living just in pairs.
Right.
So that pair, you know what I mean? They're if they have it in them, they're not spreading it in because they're just kind of isolated. But as they kind of come back through, other ducks will get, infected.
Right.
So you're looking at the same kind of a cycle happening again.
Yeah.
But again, it's not going to affect our songbirds. It's not going to
Right.
affect the birds that are coming to the feeders.
Now, you reminded me, and I do appreciate this because I do feel like I have a better handle on this issue now. But I'm thinking, like in my own backyard, I've got a tiny little landscape pond, probably not about the size of this table here,
Yeah.
right? I've had ducks land in that before.
Right.
Now, I also have birds that use it, as a bird bath too.
Right.
Right? So the ducks can pass it to those other birds that way then, couldn't they?
I suppose in theory
It's
it
possible.
could. And if you think about it,
Unlikely, but possible.
well, but I would just say like that interaction, you're not unusual. Like, and if you just think of like any preserve, any place there's a lake,
Right.
anywhere there's a
There's
pond, there's
birds.
a lot of wild birds, right? So these kind of things are happening millions and millions of
Right,
times,
right.
right? And it's never happened.
Right.
So I wouldn't worry
Okay.
about the one thing. Now, if you have ducks coming underneath your feeders, I'd say, hey, try and keep the feet off the ground. We don't
Right.
want to,
Right.
exasperate the situation.
Right.
And if you do have ducks coming and you're worried about your feeders, you can take your feeders away. But those ducks and those birds are still going to interact in that
Right.
kind of
They
way.
do out in the world, out in the wild.
They
anyway.
do out in the wild anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything, it sounds like you've answered this already, but I mean, is there anything we can do to help mitigate the spread of it when the migration comes back through in the fall? Or that's just not possible as part of that life cycle?
Well, I mean, if you have ducks and geese that come under your feeders or something, you can really try and keep the trays under your stuff so that no food's going on the ground, so they're not congregating there.
Right, right.
Steps like that. But in terms of preventing this from getting into the songbirds, it kind of doesn't get into the songbirds.
Right, we
so
don't
there's
feel
not
it.
really
Yeah.
and I mean, I was disappointed in the DNR in that just even the way they kind of put this out there, and then they said, well, like, you can't feed hummingbirds even, because they clarified and said, oh, no, you can't even feed hummingbirds. And it's like, it's almost like they didn't have an understanding of how, like, ducks
Right,
aren't
right.
coming to your hummingbird feeders. They did take that back, but just kind of the way they put it out there again, and then took it back, it kind of almost showed like they don't have an understanding of how this happens,
Right, right.
So it was a little disappointing to me. I know it's kind of like, and they picked an arbitrary date of May 31st as if like by some magic,
Right.
there's no more
We're
ducks
safe
or
June
something.
1st, yeah, yeah.
So, but I wish they would have followed the science, and that's what I encourage people, to do. And basically all the other states, the CDC, all of those organizations said it's fine to feed the birds, and just follow the science. But
Yeah.
for whatever reason, they decided to go their own route.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess but that's a really good point for anybody on this topic. The idea would be collect the information.
Yeah.
And go to get it from a variety of sources. Certainly,
Right.
the CDC is a really good source to
Exactly.
to access. Mel, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is
I
good.
appreciate the opportunity to talk, and
Yeah.
it's always good to be here.
No, and it's fun. It's fun to have the backyard birds, but also help us understand what do we need to worry about or not worry about.
Right, right.
so.
And I personally just believe it's such a great thing to be feeding the birds. It brings so many people joy.
Right.
And we all know how the health benefits of just kind of observing nature can
Sure.
be. So that's like a fantastic thing, and I hate to see that, kind of
Right,
go away.
right,
So
right.
yeah, just like I said, if ducks come in, geese come in, let's just
Right.
kind of keep the feet off the ground.
Certain areas to be careful and
Yeah.
cautious in general.
Don't pick up dead birds
Yeah.
or dead
Good advice.
anything.
Yeah, don't handle dead birds.
Yeah.
Wash your hands.
Yeah, and it's always a good reminder for us to kind of keep our feeders clean.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good, Mel. Thank you very
so
much.
Yeah.
I'm Dave Wurzel, and you've been watching Spotlight. We've been taking a look at the avian flu. Thank you for watching.